Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Today is April 7, 2023. This salon is called McLuhan's Solutions, and we welcome Clinton, Rob, Roy, and Duncan. So, gentlemen, Marcel Duchamp was at a party and they asked him, the guy casually asked him, "So what do you do?" And he says, "I'm a breather." So let's, as a group, consciously take in one breath together. 1, 2, 3. And release. So that's what we're going to be doing today, is consciously uncovering the hidden psychic effects of Clinton's essays on McLuhan and McLuhan's essays. Now, the fact that that Clinton named it McLuhan's Solutions is very important, because I called it Concerned Netizens as McLuhan. But I want to clarify that to Clinton especially, is that we are all concerned netizens. So as a group or a community or a Zoom of 5 faces, that's we as we're McLuhan. So just to clarify that. But I will flip it into McLuhan's Solutions, because back to Duchamp said there's no solutions because there's no problems.
Right.
Which I especially love. So what's new, gentlemen? Well, it's not out yet. And, you know, the guy walks into the antique store and says, "What's new?" Well, what's new is that Clinton wrote these essays, and you linked it to a McLuhan document that had never been released. It's like some secret cache document. And it's McLuhan talking about the ads are a form of magic from September 11, 9/11, the year I was born, 1953. So the first question comes directly from that source, Clinton's printing and making available that Commonweal article. He said, future environments which the ads promise, not satisfied with the present. They live, blah, blah, blah. So I like that, not satisfied with the present. So the first round robin question, and we'll start with you, Duncan. Are you satisfied with the present?
Well, at least I flatter myself that more than most people. And proof of that is I get a little less stirred up by the latest latest technology, the latest products, the latest fashions. All that commerce type stuff absolutely depends upon dissatisfaction. If they can't make you dissatisfied, or if you're not dissatisfied, you're not going to buy anything but for your basic needs. And God knows you can't run a modern economy on basic needs.
Very good, Duncan. Create the disease and offer the cure. Roy, you're up. Are you satisfied with the present?
Sometimes I'm satisfied with the present, but then there's a voice in the back of my head saying it won't last. So then I won't be satisfied with it anymore.
Hey, I'm really happy to be here with you guys. Thank you so much. Clinton, are you satisfied with the present?
Yeah. I'm not well adjusted to it. I'm not comfortable with it, but I'm satisfied.
Beautiful. Robbie Do.
No.
Thank God someone said no.
my present in particular. Research has shown that people tend to live in 3 different times. Some people live in the past, some people, their consciousness lives in the present, and other people live in the future. Those people that live in the past tend to be very nostalgic and are also easy victims, easy prey for advertisers. As Clinton discussed in his piece, talking about totemistic images and symbols. So I try to live in the present, but the media keeps us referring to the past.
Rear view mirrorism, right on, dude. Okay, the second question is the article continues with this line: advertising creates a promised land. What is the promised land for you? We'll reverse the order. Robbie, do.
Well, the promised land was California, but it got too expensive. Now the promised land is probably an imaginary space that I've seen in movies and advertising that makes me can imagine I can have a hassle-free life.
Really well done. Thank you. Clinton, what is the promised land for you?
What was promised was a world full of computers, but no one can see the computers. They can only see the surface of whatever they're being disguised as or sold to them as commodities. And so since we're not programming them, and since we don't even recognize what they are, how they work, they can't really be ostensibly what we think they are. There was one generation or two generations that grew up in the 80s and 90s who understood computers because they had to fix them. And now that it's all sealed up again, we don't live in a world of computers anymore. There's that guy, not to go on for too long, but there's a whole book called Invisible Computing by Don Norman, a major name in product design, right? And it's like, we got to make computers invisible. No one likes them. And that's not my promised land.
It's really good. Thank you. Roy, what is your promise? What is the promised land for you?
A delusion. Well, actually, in Dylan, advertising signs con you into thinking you're the one that can do what's never been done, that can win what's never been won.
Wait, that's Dylan Thomas?
No, that's It's All Right, Ma.
That's Robert Zimmerman.
All right,
Robert Zimmerman to you, yeah.
That's good. Well, he's a Dylan Thomas wannabe. That's his promise land. Okay, Duncan, what is the promised land for you?
I go to my promised land on a regular basis these days. It's when a group of people gather together to read something together and then to talk about it in very human terms. And I will have to say that many times it doesn't get, I can't imagine things getting any better than that. So that must be my promised land.
Well, my promised land is sitting here with you guys. I'm a Pollyanna. So, yeah, I'll give a couple bonus 2 questions because you knocked them out of the park, gentlemen. So this question comes up a couple paragraphs later. The GIs in the last war decided they were fighting for the American girl associated in their minds with Coca-Cola, hamburgers, youth, and hygiene. What are you fighting for? Clinton, will start with you.
Well, I'll keep Coca-Cola on the list.
Coke Classic, though.
Of course.
The real thing.
Perception.
Nice.
A preservation of individualism or individuality, not in a sense of I am a rock, I'm an island, not in the sense of not acknowledging our debts to those on whom we rely in our larger place in society, but just the very idea of having an individuality that's not defined by where you fit according to your schematization in someone else's chart of pre-selected identities. but an individuality, which is the ability to stand back and enter your own mind as a free thinking person who can withstand social pressures or the deluge of influences or media, right? You can be unreadable by the machine that's trying to crawl inside your head, which is modern marketing or big data or however it gets characterized generation through generation, right? Individuality as just the bastion of what makes us human and not a hive animal.
Good, Clinton. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robbie Dew, what are you fighting for?
I'm not fighting a lot. I mean, that frame of fighting, often those types of struggles don't work. But to take it in the spirit of the question, individuality, recognition for my special contributions to the world, freedom, the generic shit that I saw on television.
Those are three good words. Roy, what are you fighting for?
I guess for freedom to think my own thoughts, do my own explorations without being coerced or propagandized.
That's good. Freedom's coming up a lot. Okay, Duncan.
Oh, this is going to be real sentimental. What am I fighting for? I'm fighting for that when I die, which I will, that I will be satisfied that I have done my best.
Yeah, it's good. Well, that's why you guys are inspirations to me, because I always feel like you guys are all doing your best. And I'm a Pollyanna slacker. So here's the bonus fourth question. How do we get solutions without rear view mirrorism? So, it's basically everything we invent has services and disservices. Did we invent rear view mirrorism? And, Clinton, if we name it McLuhan's solutions,
Mm-hmm.
how do we get these McLuhan solutions? How do we engage in them, use them, absorb them, abandon them without rear view mirrorism? Start with you, Clinton.
Proper shoulder checks to investigate our blind spots.
Wait, shoulder?
Have you ever driven a car, Jerry?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. You're the type of person who very well might not have. But
I don't anymore. I was raised in a Motor City, Flint, Michigan, and I sold my car like 5 years ago, and I hate to drive cars. I will not drive a car anymore the rest of my life.
mm-hmm.
I don't really like to be in them, but I have to be sometimes. But what is the shoulder word? I just don't know that. What is it?
So your rear view mirror lets you look behind you, but you have to do a shoulder check to check your blind spots. So
You mean the rear view mirror doesn't get it all, so you literally
There you go. Yes,
Yeah.
very good, actually.
Yeah. This is a point I was making, and you brought this up before we started airing, but the difference between primary sources and secondary sources and upon which you rely. You're kind of very much living in the present version of the past when you're reading the latest version of the past, or someone interpreting the past for you, a second-hand source telling you about something that you could very well investigate on your own if you went and checked the primary sources directly. I might have said that unclearly, but you get the point. One way out is to go do the legwork yourself, and not take someone's secondhand opinion on the past.
Right, Robbie, how do we get solutions without rear view mirrorism? Oh, you're on mute, Rob.
Sorry about that. it's difficult because you always have to reflect on what's gone before for forming your new solution. I would say one of the biggest issues that we have regarding this is how we try to invest our petty institutions with permanence. Even, the institution of marriage, forever until death do you part. I mean, we have a lot of investment in forever. Religion and the U.S. Constitution and government drapes itself in being a permanent institution, and that this is going to be the truth forever. And so it makes it very difficult for people to examine as they go. And Clinton mentioned blind spots, and we almost always have blind spots around our solutions. Usually our solutions are reactionary, and they in turn create problems as they go. I mean, I think the solution would be, and this isn't something that's practical, but since we're being abstract, for collectively humans to do a better job of evaluating and not getting drawn into and applying McLuhan thought and seeing the unintended consequences that are engendered from everything we create. Maybe it's just the nature that when something new is introduced, it changes the whole program in ways that are unpredicted. And so we don't often think about that. We do that when we look in the rearview mirror. We do it once the effects have had their effect, and once mitigation is diminished because it's too late. Everything's out, right? So could we do that in process? In the analogy for a relationship would be, rather than waiting till things get to a fight and a breakdown in a relationship, along the way you have little spots and say, hey, that annoyed me, could we work on that? As opposed to waiting to a blow up. And yet that's when we do it. The traffic sign gets put up once there's been a death at the intersection.
Mhm.
Really good, Rob. Roy, how do we get solutions without rear view mirrorism?
So you're saying that objects in the past are bigger than they appear? But yeah, I mean, I don't think you can escape the past. I think you do need the past. I like the fact that the wake is present, past, and future simultaneously. And he talks about the hicknunks of the present and the past and the music of the future combined, I guess, which is kind of like that movie that won the Academy Award right there.
Well, it's interesting, Roy, because that's Wyndham Lewis, which Clinton covers a lot in his articles. Artists live in the present. I don't even like to say artists. We live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. That sounds so gobbledygooky, but it rings of some sort of sense. If we come out of Ram Dass in the 60s, be here now. Like we're all trying to live in the moment, right? That moment right there. Oh, it already went by. That moment. That moment. Really good. Okay, Duncan, how do we get solutions without rear view mirrorism? Oh, you're on mute, Duncan.
By clarifying what rear view mirrorism is, which I think Clinton did brilliantly when he focused on an actual rear view mirror and pointed out that one of the big problems with the rear view mirror is it doesn't cover the waterfront, so to speak. And you have to go. And then, oddly enough, one of the solutions for overcoming the problem of rear view mirrorism is by looking at the past.
Yeah.
That it's not like we're well trained in history and we're, I'm speaking of the general American public is well trained in history, and our rear view mirrorism is based in reality, which it isn't. Most of our rear view mirrorism is movies and television, where the Middle Ages are presented to us in this way, and and the Crusades in that way, and on and on. It's not really, we're not really looking at what's going on behind. So that's another thing. So an odd little thing. I'll tell a little story. Went to the Dante thing the other day, and the Italian fellow who's the head of it, Masi, he asked a question about what do you think astronomy was like during Dante's time? And my first reaction was just kind of, oh, Masi, God, forget that. But it caught me, and later on I went in and I discovered some really incredible material related to astronomy during Dante's time, and Dante's contribution to modern astronomy, which he did things which did not happen again until Einstein came along.
Wow.
Okay. So that's one thing. And then the rear view mirrorism is that we are trained to, we get caught in the opinions of authorities and opinions of the crowd around us. When really, whether you believe in God or not is kind of irrelevant. It's kind of a good idea to pretend, at least pretend, that there is a higher being and that you want to find out how you should behave towards a higher being, rather than worrying about, we should love each other, all these other people, we should love each other, but that's not where we should be getting our clues from. So like with the Dante thing, I think that Masi's a human being. I know him. I know he's good. I know he's bad. In this particular case, I take it as he was saying something from a higher spirit coming through him.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for, in my opinion. And that's how we get out of rear view mirrorism, and that we actually get into real history, and we work for real values. And we'll make mistakes. All right, so what?
Yeah, I like what, hold on, Roy, 1 second. I like what Duncan said in seeing Rob go bye-bye was sad, because he's an educator. And Roy, you're an educator. So I wanted you to weigh in what Duncan just said, but also tackle this. Whoever wins writes the history books. How do we deal with that? Okay, go ahead, Roy.
No, yeah, what you were saying, Duncan, it just reminded me of there's this distinction that Blake makes between the daughters of memory and the daughters of inspiration, and where the daughters of inspiration, they perceive what it always is all the time, whereas the daughters of memory simply regurgitate the past or try to repeat the past. But it's interesting in Ulysses, actually, Stephen takes exception with that, because he prizes memory, and says, it was in some way, if not how memory had fabled it. So he doesn't want to.
But Roy, just to clarify, you're saying daughters of inspiration are more comprehensive and dealing with all the times, in the daughters of memory are just the past. Is that the distinction?
But this is according to Blake. William Blake makes that distinction, because he I guess he considered, he was a visionary, I think, and he even talks about hear the voice of the bard that present, past, and future sees. That he had that vision.
But
I think Stephen and Joyce took exception to his denigration of memory,
and they were more they were more daughters of inspiration.
Well, I don't know. I think Stephen aligns himself with the doors of memory. I'm not sure. You know, and I know Buck Mulligan once said to Joyce, why don't you just forget the past? And he said, that's not. I haven't. I can't do that. You know?
I can't do that. Yeah. Well, it's funny because it's good to have you here, Roy, because that's McLuhan says, if you don't get all of Joyce and the symbolists, you won't get me. So it's hard because Clinton knows it's tough in the McLuhan world to find McLuhanites who are actually Joyceans. It's not really dominant. And I appreciate that. But as an educator, Roy, how do you deal with whoever wins writes the history?
Yeah, that's a huge problem. There's that scene in Crimes and Misdemeanors, I think, where they're having a seder, and they mention, if the Nazis had won, we would experience history completely differently. And those who control the present control the past. That's a huge problem.
Clinton,
the way they were writing the textbooks in Texas, or it's horrible.
But you have to teach what they tell you, or you teach what you want?
I actually, I have. They don't tell me what to teach.
They don't tell you what to teach. Yeah, because I know Robbie Dew's subversive, but he has to kind of teach what they want, but he slips in.
I'm told I have to cover certain things like poetry, short stories, and plays, but they don't specify what things or what political stance to take on things.
Right.
I indoctrinate my students.
The professor got fired for teaching Birth of a Nation a couple weeks ago. It's film history, and he says, you're fired. Okay, yeah. Clinton, how do we deal with this? Who writes the history books but the winners? I mean, in regards to rearview mirrorism.
Well, return to older history books.
Yes.
The funny thing. Okay, so think about how newspapers like to say that a newspaper is the first draft of history, right? And so they're kind of supposed to be a snapshot of what's happening today, and then the next issue is what's happening tomorrow, and so on. But they also need to be continuing the stories and hopefully issuing retractions or corrections where they got something wrong last week or last month when new information comes to light and all this, right? But they're always written in the present tense about what's happening right now or what happened a few hours ago, right? So I mean, it's kind of weird to think that the first error-filled draft of what we think is going on has to have continuity with itself as the always present day by day, that has to continue the story of what it was trying last week, and then somehow corrections slip in the future to revise what you read last week that turned out to be wrong as well, right? That's sort of the history that the victors get to write. They just get to stand on their tiptoes all the time and try to get people to think of what's going on. What we say is happening right now is really what's going on. And next month we'll be like, oh, we were totally mistaken, but it'll be over by then and we'd have gotten our way, right? That's the sort of history that we worry about when we say, right? I think for the most part, right? It's because it depends on. Yeah, that's what postmodernism is supposed to mean. Just this constant referring to texts, and that the connection to the actual real world lived reality of people is largely secondary or illusory or implied or forged.
Yeah, it was good. My friend is not a political conspiracy writer at all. He's written books on Jimi Hendrix that are New York Times bestsellers, but he wrote a book about Patty Hearst and it's totally, I mean, it's not kooky conspiracy. It is the LAPD was interwoven in that whole thing immensely. And he wrote this book, and it's 40 years later. Nobody cares. They don't, like, so what? You know? And it was fun to see him talk about his book and who showed up, because it was all literature people. It wasn't conspiracy political people. And it was just like, doesn't matter. So erratum, I love that, because they said, yesterday we said this happened. Today, oh, we made a mistake. That didn't happen yesterday. And it's a little column in the newspaper. Here's our mistakes from yesterday. Okay, Duncan, whoever wins writes the history. How do you deal with that? I know you read all, you're a comprehensivist, but how else besides seeking out the, you know, the normal person doesn't have the time to seek out the alternatives. If they want to sort of know what's
they don't seek out the alternative. They have the fucking time to do it. They don't. They don't think it's important. They don't think that their view of reality has been stage managed and is still being stage managed. So the way I deal with it is great amusement.
Yeah.
Has been, will be. I won't say that it will always be, but it will be for long enough that for all intents and purposes, it always will be. And you look for the few people that have kind of gotten the secret message that things are not what they appear.
Yeah.
And the story is not as airtight. And you know, I mean, this is what that's what we're trying to do. I mean, this was what the acid trips were all about. And you know, but you look at things like what's happening in Tennessee right now. I don't know if you're paying attention. It's really quite phenomenal.
Oh God.
You know, and the Tennessee legislature, you know, trying to kick out 3 people, but only getting to kick out 2 because the woman got 1 extra vote that kept her in. But I mean, how do you control a history for people who are seeing it happen?
Yeah.
So anybody with a brain who's paying attention in Tennessee is looking at this and going, "What the fuck is going on?"
Yeah.
And that's you know, it's a crack, and that's how I deal with it. And like I say, once again, you know, these are to be expected when people are paying too much attention to people.
Yeah.
You know, I'll repeat again, we should love one another, we should help one another, we should inform one another, but we shouldn't trust one another to give us the full scoop about anything.
Yeah.
You fucked up your trust in us. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because I'm curious, Clinton, you delving into the motives and the consequences of your series of articles. They've been so important to all of us. And I appreciate your work, and you filled them with content, you know, that's worthy, you know, and this is you know, Marshall said the user is the content. So, you know, you create these, and then what do we do with them? What do these people who are reading your articles do with them is even more important than you writing them, right? I mean, you want some sort of, you know, it's not just comment sections. Hey, great article, love it. You know, I want people to dig deep and take it farther. But McLuhan, being such a applied Joyce guy, he wrote in Finnegan's Wake, Joyce said, his producers, are they not his consumers? That's a question he's posing. He's not saying a statement. Much like Marshall, he's asking a question. How
Mhm.
how does this affect you? You know, you live in a consumer commodity culture. We all do. In this line, his producers, are they not his consumers? How do you rationale your whole series of articles in this regard? The user is the content, you know. His producers, are they not his consumers?
So the means by which um, all of us consumers have become the producers of the world in which we all share as as being, I guess, Westerners in ostensibly free market societies, however you want to put it, commercial culture, however. Um, the constant measurements, the 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 intense scrutiny, the of psychology, of sociology, of anthropology, all the fields that McLuhan is rattling off in this essay that I posted, The Age of Advertising, how they're fully involved in studying us and knowing us from the inside out, how hard it is to have self-awareness already, just as a right to mature and become and to have self-awareness is itself a very difficult task in a world that feeds your raw senses and desires and incentivizes nothing but chasing after things that you think you want, and eschewing the things that you don't know that you want. So to your question, humans have been pretty well figured out, and we're also always sharing all of our thoughts and desires and requests and demands out loud, putting them on the internet, signing petitions, making purchasing decisions which reveal what we're after, right? The TV shows that get popular. So to use a phrase Duncan just said, the world we have presented to us is very well stage managed. Very well. And all the things you're seeing on TV are explained to you in a way which they already know you will feel, you will, take in with as an enchanted, revelation of, oh, I see what's going on. And cutting past that veneer is not in your short-term interests. If your short-term interest is to, not collapse into a ego death, is right. All right. So, yeah. What my pieces are trying to point out is the state of things in 1953. And if you're reading them and you think, "Oh my God, this is happening today," well, no. What you're reading here is things that were happening in 1953. And what's happening today is so much more ridiculous than that. But you have to start with the past to know and to recognize how far both commerce as an enterprise to crawl inside your brain and figure out what you want so as to reshape all of the world as software into this temptation. Seduction is the word that Croker likes to use, because a seduction is something that implies that you have defense mechanisms or an awareness of bad consequences that could happen that the seducer is actively battling against, right? A seduction, you can't be seduced by something you already want. You have to be, right? Seduction implies there's a battle to make you want it more than you know what is good for yourself, or you know that you shouldn't have it, right? That's what modern technology as rhetoric is. That's what the modern media environment is it's constantly overcoming your own defense mechanisms and sense of self-preservation, right? Anyway, that was a whole bunch of disconnected answers to your question. Maybe they add up to something in the listeners' ear.
It was good.
Yes.
No, it was good, Duncan or Roy. If you guys have any response
Well,
to
a seducer knows that they're doing wrong.
Mm.
A seducer knows that they're doing wrong. They know that what they really want to do is they really want to exploit for their own gain.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what's going on now. There's a bunch of really interesting things going on. One is, and I can't guarantee it's going to happen, but the edifice is really teetering right now. It's being knocked about. You know, all of the big companies, big Silicon Valley companies are jettisoning people as fast as possible. Everybody is hyping Chat GPT and are terrified about it at the same time. We've got rumors of war. We've got accelerating climate change. So the edifice that is been pretty good for the last 20-30 years is fraying, and there's no guarantee they're going to get it together before something really serious falls apart. And at that point, even the true believers have to at least take a moment or two to go, well, fuck, what is going on? It's like to use the seducer thing. It's like, after the person who's being seduced has, been screwed and possibly left pregnant, and the perp has disappeared, and they wake up and they go, God, what happened? And what do I do now? And what is reality at this particular point? And I think that's going to be, well, at least for me, probably because I'm a little too old, don't have that many years left, but I think it's all going to go down pretty quick. I would say at least in the next 10 years, and maybe as soon as 6 months from now, really serious things are going to happen.
Well, it's interesting because, Roy, I'd love for you to weigh in on this. Isn't advertising just the art of persuasion in bottom line? So if it comes out of the symbolist, Mallarmé said, don't paint the thing, paint the effect it produces. So, Roy, you write a book about Joyce. You got a good publisher, a pretty good publisher to put it out. They put it out. You want people to get your book and read it. You don't want to just write your book. You want some sort of feedback. So what's the difference in Roy being called a seducer for people to read his books, or an advertiser, or a promoter?
I object.
No, but I'm just saying,
appropriate term when it comes to.
I want to rape my readers.
but I mean, one cool thing was, Target said, this is
right, yeah.
this book. I mean, that's a great
exploitation. That was the best promotional thing.
Well, let maybe Clinton didn't know. Clinton, Roy's book comes out about Joyce, and Target says, what did they say? It can only be
21 or years or older. You have to be. Well, I just have one chapter on crossing sexual boundaries.
Yeah. but it doesn't, it's not anything like, it's not foreign literature, but that's the whole thing of Joyce getting busted. But I'm just saying, how do you're in this world of persuasion. I mean, it's not that it's unfair, it's just, how do you separate persuasion from seduction from,
Yeah. Well, I interpret that line, his his consumers? Are they not his? I mean, his producers, are they not his consumers? A little differently. That in finding an audience, if you do create a product, finding someone, a big enough audience that's going to consume it, actually in a way does produce the author or the artist. If you don't find your audience, you're not going to be produced. But I know Marlon Brando was very disturbed by the idea that he had been reduced to a product. He says, I'm like a box of cereal or something.
Yeah.
And he seemed to lose track of this idea that he, just because people were buying his product did not mean that there was not this genius that and I don't know if seduce is the right word, but really convince and want to engage with it.
Yeah, I think when people criticize my movie, that's the highest thing, rather than just saying, I saw it, it was fun, great. I want them to just rip into it, because then I know they actually consumed it somewhat. But again, I take it personal. I was like, well, I could rationale that or blah, blah, blah. But Clinton, what do you want people to do with your articles? What kind of action do you want to happen?
I want people to engage primary materials more.
To read, that means read McLuhan.
Yeah, or so. And you brought up that the fact that I made the case that McLuhan's method was to go read primary sources himself. So
Yeah.
so you were asking what term do we come up for if reading McLuhan, if McLuhan is the primary source, what do we call McLuhan's primary sources? All right, so that's kind of
The sources.
Just sources. There doesn't need an adjective. No, I would call influencing sources, then primary sources, then secondary. But but go ahead.
Yes,
but go ahead, Clinton. What do you want them to do with it? They read your article. What's action or continuing the conversation?
Well, I'm demonstrating a writing that I don't think fits within the conversations that most intellectual circles fall into, and that's because most intellectual circles are circles. They're communities. They're little dialectics. They're back and forths. They're collectively comprised of the conversations going back and forth. So, whereas when I say I prize an individualism, I'd like to exhibit that it's possible to go do your own reading and go to your own sources and go come up with something that wasn't derived from a contemporary socially constructed zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Basically, everyone is asking all the smartest people they know what's going on. All the smartest people they know are talking to all the other smartest people they know, and they're all talking to each other and arguing amongst each other. And so all their dialogue, all the perceptions that they're co-creating for each other are all sourced by each other, and their worldview is socially constructed. And yeah, if you leave out if you leave out the importance of well, I mean, think of the tarot card with the hermit on it who's alone on the mountain. That's my first thought that comes to mind. But if you lose the importance of actually the being taken out of your environment, your social environment, and going out on your own for a while, which is what young people do when they go backpacking across Europe, or right, the importance of someone doing their doctoral thesis to just go hit the books, right? You have to have your individuation, your period of individuation away, so that you can return back to the group with something new that they didn't have.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're so all connected all the time, 24/7, that there's very little opportunity. People can't be alone with themselves and their own thoughts for 5 minutes, let alone months, right?
Yeah.
People don't have practiced ability to sit alone with their thoughts. And so we fetishize mindfulness, and we sell it to people as this, perversion of yoga, in a way which, doesn't deliver the goods of what actual these sort of time for yourself. Not in a, I'm going to take a bath with, bath salts and some nice incense and a bottle of wine time to myself, but like time to yourself to individuate and grow as a person with these primary sources, voices from the past, right? That's what I'd like people to realize is the method behind being able to write stuff that no one else seems to have been able to read, has come across before, and no one else is writing like this. How do they do it? Well, I'm not just plunging my head into the current conversation all the time. You keep one foot in that, and keep one foot in privacy.
It's amazing. It sounds like George Lakoff said, you have to use the existing tools and invent new tools. It's a combination, but what you just described is often what I see in Duncan saying. Duncan has this schedule like me, go all the time, this, but you've described, Duncan, what Clinton just articulated, where you just chill out. How do you do that? Is it from your Eastern philosophy studies, or how do you learn? Yeah, because I'm always like, well, I've got to chill out, but I better have YouTube on beside me just in case I get bored or something, like just like go take a nap with no reading material, no physical reading material, or a laptop next to me. How do you do that, Duncan?
Well, I mean, I have of course dabbled in Eastern thought quite a bit, and I have always been an isolated reader. But I would say having a wife and 3 young children for an extended period of time set me up to appreciate time by myself.
I see.
And I learned very easily. I was raised by a corporation, and I watched all the men there striving and struggling to get promotions and to do this, that, and the other, only to get dumped on their asses by the corporation when automation came in. And I saw them all go crazy, and I thought, you know what? That doesn't look like very much fun. I think I'll do something else. And it helped to have a retarded brother. Having someone in the family like that already immediately creates a little bit of a separation from the herd.
Yeah. Wow.
So there's all that stuff, and then you discover that, you know what, it's just a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of fun to read things that nobody else is reading, to put thoughts together that nobody else is going to put together because they're reading different stuff, or they're reading what everybody else is reading. And it's good. And I will tell you a little bit. First of all, I want to bring out that the symbolist thing about the symbolists were doing it to write poetry and to take different edges, and mash them together, kind of the intellectual version of permaculture. The advertisers saw that these were powerful tools and started to use them for exploitation and profit. Certainly there would have been no symbolists who were also just trying to seduce people and to be, the poet of the moment or whatever. And you certainly had your Aleister Crowley types, who were into out and out exploitation and the rape of young children and all that stuff. But it really starts getting serious in my mind when Freud's nephew goes into the PR business, when the advertisers start realizing taking these artistic techniques and using them to sell products, and then under pressure, under commercial pressure to make more and more profit and more sales, to still, in my opinion, this is where Jerry and I tend to have a conflict, but it's okay. Advertisers are there to exploit people, and with each passing year, the pressure to exploit becomes bigger and bigger because the people at the top want more power and they want more money. So I kind of got lost in my own
No,
rambling.
that was good, Duncan. But I did want to go to Roy, because you live in the busiest town in the world, and you have this history of literature that's so deep in your head, but you retain sort of a playfulness. How do you chill out? What Clinton described, and we went to Duncan. How do you know how not to overload yourself? Like, we live in a sensory overload. How did you do that to enable yourself to shut down a little so you could write your book?
Yeah, well, I think that's important because I think there's some. I mean, there's something obsessive about my mind, which I like that fact, but then also I have to get away from it in order to keep my sanity. So there's Reddit, there's Solitaire, Jameson. I don't know. This is my Zen calendar.
That's good.
Yeah, they're also, but you can take a walk, but don't forget New York City. We just survived Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is a strong city.
You did.
Congratulations.
Yeah, bravo. But back to you, Clinton. How has it shaped your behavior? Like going to a conference, presenting these, like you sort of talked about this, talking about the form and the content a little. You decided to do these papers with printed word or electronic text and the videos. And they were fun. I liked them. And then you says, okay, I'm not going to do the videos now. I'm just going to present the text. But then you, in the midst of all that, you did it live with people. So how has this shaped your behavior in going, what's the next step? I'm going to continue, like it's a great McLuhan line. Carefully make plans, then do the opposite.
Very.
That's one of my favorite McLuhanisms. And it's like, everybody has their backdoor plan, well, if that doesn't work, but literally doing the opposite. So yeah, any thoughts, Clinton?
Yeah, there will be time for decisions and revisions.
At a moment, we'll reverse.
Thank you, Roy. Yes. So, as Jerry said, I've been producing videos online for like 5 years now, talking about this stuff, and I've always hated it. And I kind of don't want to get natural and good at it. I almost feel like the fakest you can be is to pretend to be happy and talking to someone when you're not, and you're alone in your room staring at a camera. Now here, at least I see you three fellas. Like, we are actually talking, right? It's great. It's great. It's fine, right? But I just standing in front of an audience and responding and working with the audience and seeing their reactions and playing off of it and feeling the pressure of knowing what you think they just heard and having to respond to your intuition of what they think you just said, and because you see it in their faces, right? I don't want to get good or well adjusted to faking that interaction, because that seems like a way to skew my soul in the wrong direction away from what I want, which is a proper human embodied relation to the world and to other people, right? Which is exactly the sort of thing which media is constantly in tension against. right? The well-adjusted man is the somnambulist. Right? To be well-adjusted is sort of what I've been thinking lately of in terms of the flow state, right? To be able to get really good at interfacing with a machine until you just get a flow with it and it comes natural to you. The work of turning a bunch of discrete steps that you practiced on into one flow, one performance that you get good at is the way of well adjusting yourself to whatever arena that you're entering there with that agency to master, right? I'm gonna master this environment by developing the perfect workflow, right? Right. This is all factory shop talk for exactly how companies and how factories, train and ingratiate their worker into being the perfect cog in the machine, like Duncan was just describing there with the fellows whose jobs were replaced by automation, right? Work wants to make you feel like you're part of the family, right up until they don't need you anymore, right? Getting good at a thing changes you. So yeah, I decided no, I don't want to get really good at acting in front of a webcam to a YouTube audience that I'd be responding to through chats and likes and upvotes and that junk. Because it's the wrong direction for my development of all right. I don't want the effects of that to then carry on into my regular day-to-day life. I'd rather my regular day-to-day life consist of proper, full human connections and relations and discussions, and then for that part to bleed into my internet stuff. All right, that's the right direction of causality. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is just to interrupt for a second, Clinton, which is what Roy, you've developed teaching in front of live human beings. So you feed off their eye contact and their sort of body language and their verbal. So
yeah, I much prefer discussions than lecturing.
You like, that's right. And so then you shift to COVID, Zoom a little. Yeah. And then we meet you in this situation where there is no live bodies, but it sure seems like we know each other. Mm-hmm. And we feel that there's some sort of presence, even though, McLuhan said the ad is a substitute for the product. So, you go to the restaurant and you read the description of the dinner in the menu, and then you taste the description. You don't even taste the actual food. Now, he's pushing this to an extreme. I mean, how have you adjusted, Roy, to what Clinton was just talking about? He says, I don't want to do that, but you've done that for so many years, but there must be downfalls to that. The kids don't pay attention, or they're still staring at their cell phone or staring out the window.
Yeah. I mean, I was, there are problems to either thing. I was the last 2 semesters or the last 3 semesters I've been distance, but I'm really happy to get back to face to face. It's that there's no substitute for me in. Even though I can see the people, see everybody's face right there, and it's, but actually, I had a question for Clinton. Am I allowed to ask Clinton?
Please.
Because I was curious what the Gnostic connection was. I know that's the title, and I did find that one verse from the Rubaiyat where he talks about, we're not ashamed for the soul in this clay carcass crippled to abide. That seems actually like a kind of Gnostic sentiment, that this, that the human, the physical body is almost like a corpse that or a prison that traps the soul, and that they have that Gnostic duality. But I don't know if is that something that McLuhan talks about?
Yeah. So this essay, my little analysis of the age of advertising, is I saw it as part 4 of my little series I'm doing about McLuhan among the Gnostics. So McLuhan realized just how much the artists that he was studying, Joyce, especially T.S. Eliot, the symbolist poets, were all really directly drawing on Gnostic literature and Neoplatonism, largely as it had been adopted and, let's say, transmuted by theosophy and occultists and these little secret societies and brotherhood and fraternities and Golden Dawn and stuff, right? So McLuhan didn't really realize that all the art techniques he had been studying as art techniques had shared so much in direct identity with what had completely in very different circles been taught as occult ritual.
Mhm.
And so when T.S. Eliot is talking about this dissociation of sensibilities that's happened after the metaphysical poets, whereby people's in McLuhan's language, all of their senses became dissociated. That's to say that visual space overtook acoustic space, and now acoustic space is coming back, but they're not interfacing through tactility inside of them to create an integral citadel of consciousness or awareness, so to speak, right? McLuhan is looking at that as art studies, trying to figure that out and test that out of T.S. Eliot for 20 years. And then suddenly in 1952, it was like, oh my God, it's cult shit. Oh my God, it's Gnostics. So he starts writing letters to Eric Voegelin, who's writing books about Gnosticism. And Voegelin goes into, oh yeah, it's all about how they think that that they're really secret souls trapped in their physical bodies, but there's a mind-body split, and they want to return back to heaven by turning heaven by. Well, that's how the video started. Was Jerry asking about what's the promised land, and and rear view mirrors. And whenever people feel like who they really are is just this thing that can't exist yet here and now, but can eventually become manifest with the right ritual, right? That's what advertising is oh, your life sucks until I sell you this thing that will complete you, or I sell you these things that you need, right? It's just this disconnect, so that people's perceptions are never of the here and now. They're not satisfied with the here and now, right? There's been this magic, which their body is fallen and disappoints their true identity, which has to then be helped along spiritually. All this sort of stuff. It's all very circular.
Yeah. It's where, remember that there's a section in Four Quartets where T.S. Eliot, the voice or whatever, talks about all the different ways of forms of divination, with the crystal ball and augury and palm reading and all these kind of occult ways of usually predicting the future, where he says that he kind of rejects that and says I'm interested in the transit of time and eternity, whereas if your interest is in predicting the future through occult means, or even influencing the future through occult means.
Yeah.
You're not.
The Four Quartets came out after his take up of Anglicanism. Is that right?
That sounds right, but I couldn't say for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But he also makes fun of Madame Sisostris in The Wasteland, with a wicked pack of cards.
Yeah. That's something McLuhan points out to Voegelin, is how the end of The Wasteland, where it's all barren landscapes and rocks and there's very little water, McLuhan was finding all these occult ritual things entailing that precise iconography and kind of matching them up point by point, right? Right. The substance of the poem was informed by some ritual that a bunch of dudes in funny hats came up with.
What book is that in, or what article are you talking about?
Yes. These are a set of correspondences back and forth between Marshall McLuhan and Eric Vogelin. You can find them on the Vogelin View website.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
What's interesting, this T.S. Eliot Four Quartets, because there was a homeless guy in Venice once, and he would just recite the four quartets over and over by memory.
Wow.
And we got to have discussions with him, and he had an accident, a bad car accident in his youth, and his parents eventually hired someone because he lost the ability to speak from the accident. And the parents hired this teacher to teach him how to speak by memorizing the four quartets by Eliot. And this was like the crossroads of Venice. It was all like, or when all the four things hit, that's where he hung out. What do you call that thing where it's all the vortex? The vortex. It was the vortex. Oh, you're on mute, Duncan.
Wow.
Yeah. So the four quartets at the four corners.
At the four corners and the tetrad and everything. What he said was, within the four quartets itself, Eliot taught the guide to the four quartets. Reading it and understanding it is in the text of the four quartets itself. So it's sort of Wakean, it's like the Cliff Notes how to read Finnegan's Wake are embedded within the Wake if you're paying attention. And so I'm curious, this all advertising advertises advertising. This is a great line that McLuhan said.
Yeah.
And that's not quite doing it, but the first two paragraphs of Marshall's first book, which comes back to Duchamp full circle, is The Mechanical Bride, is a term he got from Duchamp describing the car. We marry our cars, the mechanical bride. In the first two paragraphs in the intro to Mechanical Bride, he says, well, if advertising techniques work, why don't we use them to educate people? So that's where, I love this brush between me and Duncan, because I think, advertising, snake oil salesmen, scam artists are the best and the biggest and the greatest. Sorry. And it's not that I want them to sell you crap. It's just that I learned from your article, a good one, Clinton, Leonardo da Vinci was an ad man, David Mamet, Frank Zappa.
So was Barry Manilow, don't forget.
Yeah, and and the list is endless. Andy Warhol. And it doesn't mean that, that's trying to rationale advertising, selling you crap. It's just saying there's some technique. So this whole thing of like, I'm going to reveal the technique of how to understand my product is what T.S. Eliot was doing in Four Quartets, supposedly. And if McLuhan's saying that same thing, well, why don't we use their technique? Well, are their techniques some evil brainwashing social engineering, MK Ultra scam to get you to buy crap? Or are they just utilizing some human technique, which we could call social engineering? I guess the question is social engineering bad?
Right. Well, again,
or better yet, it would be, what are the services and disservices of social engineering? Go ahead, Clinton.
Well, okay, so we'd like to think about the artist as an individual, but the very idea of selling out implies you're selling out to someone.
Yeah.
So yes, they're using the techniques. Do they know what they're selling? Right? I mean, again, it's whether or not social engineering is good or bad is besides the question. There's how do you give people the freedom to opt in, or more importantly, opt out of what they're being sold, or to how to be an individual, how to have private actual thoughts and deliberations within which you can talk yourself out of something that everyone else is trying to talk you into.
By bombarding them with advertising, then they develop a critical thinking skill. If you're namby-pamby about it and like, oh, we don't want to harm you.
Okay, so on the one hand, that's sort of how constructivism works, right? Jean Piaget and all those guys, like, kids learn stuff because they got a model of how the world works, and then they do something and it worked differently than they thought, and their model breaks, and then they got to build their model again, right? You ask a kid, like, which has more water in it, the tall narrow glass or the short fat glass, and they're going to say, oh, the tall narrow glass every time, but they have the exact same volume of water, and you pour them in the same container and it's the exact same amount, right? Oh my gosh, right? Yeah, so by constantly tricking kids and then breaking their preconceived notions, you're teaching them stuff, right? So that's what you're saying.
Is that wait, hold on a second, Clint. Is that like B.F. Skinner? Is that like evil social engineering?
Well, Skinner, okay, yes, behaviorism was used for a lot of social engineering, and that's rewards and punishments, right? That's operative conditioning, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Pigeon based.
Yeah, Jean Piaget is like more like the way his work has been applied, the way that people who are applying Piaget have applied Piaget. Their thing is more like, let's turn classrooms and museums into these places for children to freely play and learn by their, and they will become through their self-directed pedagogy in these rec room, playground style open classrooms of exploration and discovery, right? That's what came out of Piaget.
But you're saying that Piaget is just light behaviorism, but it's more humanistic, or it's not?
Well, no, Piaget is not about rewarding good behavior and punishing bad behavior. It's not about reflexes. Skinner is about reflexes, right?
Yeah.
Right. Piaget is about how kids develop. First, a sense of object permanence, which is peekaboo, right? First, the kid has to learn that mom didn't disappear just because she stuck hands in front of her face, right? Like, objects exist even though when I'm not looking at them. Object permanence turns into, things are heavy, things are light. You can throw a light thing far, right? A sense of how the physical world works. The conservation of some properties across many different instances. Oh, look at that. All rocks are heavy. The gray one is also heavy, and the tan one is, right? And then developing abstract concepts from those, like developing the very notion of abstract reasoning from the conservation of principles across all the many different variations one's encounters, right? Sorry, that's Piaget. So walking a kid through early childhood development is that. And that's very, very, very difficult to apply because it's so universal and abstract that everyone who tries to apply it and create an environment for children to learn ends up having blind spots, and the kids don't fall for it because humans can't engineer total environments unless you actually are an advertiser conglomerate who can control the entire world and have TVs in everyone's houses 24/7. This is Jacques Ellul's stuff, right? Propaganda doesn't work unless you control the entire environment within which people are learning and developing.
Yeah, make their lives shitty and they'll watch television.
Yeah, right. Yeah, close up every exit to escape from the total controlled environment, right?
Yeah, and you have a choice. It's either channel 2, channel 4, or channel 7. And look, now you have 800 million channels.
And nothing to watch.
And nothing on.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, Ernie Kovacs, television is medium rare, is a rare medium.
Yeah, that's an
Well,
oxymoron.
I got a question for Clinton.
Yeah,
when I
go
get to
ahead.
that. So, Clinton, I want to clarify.
Yeah.
So, McLuhan, McLuhan made a strategic change in his style.
Hmm.
And the question is, was he doing that because he thought he would be more effective doing it that way? Or was he doing that because he had to make a living?
I think it was efficacy. He didn't make. I mean, he had it. He kept his job at the University of Toronto for his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how he made his living.
Okay.
He wasn't selling out. Right. He didn't buy a McMansion somewhere. Right. He was all right. But it was efficacy. He complained. I think it was a letter to Ezra Pound in 49. Right. All right. It's the letter where he's saying, "I'm an intellectual thug with an arsenal that I plan to use it." Right. He
Mhm.
said, and the reason for his approach was, as he said, Wyndham Lewis was an atom bomb going off in the desert. Impact nil. Right?
Mhm.
Wyndham Lewis writes all these great books. No one reads them. They're too long. And so, no one reads them. And so he made no dent, right? His all of his efforts were wasted, therefore, right? At least in Lewis's lifetime. He just kind of got trotted out every once in a while, for some BBC thing as oh, here's that great artist you might remember, right? But he just right.
If an atom bomb falls in the desert, no one hears it.
Except John Wayne, he gets cancer and dies.
So yeah, I mean, the art of rhetoric. That what you were clarifying there about producers and consumers, Roy. I think it was you, Roy, just saying that by finding your audience, your message must therefore be shaped and produced by them somehow, right? There's I guess there's been a long-standing philosophical debate about whether wisdom is best epitomized by truth or by eloquence, right? And so I guess the Socratics, to generalize, were on the side of truth as signifying wisdom, whereas rhetoricians and sophists would say that eloquence epitomized wisdom. And McLuhan was more on the eloquent side. He was more on the, if no one's going to listen to you, it doesn't matter if what you're saying is true. No one's listening to you. Yeah, go be right all alone in your closet, right? All right, all by yourself, right?
So when did he expect to have this effect?
Oh,
The
well,
effect that he was trying to affect, when did he expect that to actually happen?
he had it. He built a name for himself, a reputation. He ran into educational circles, got funding for once he acquired funding for Explorations magazine and had his team of multidisciplinary minds to begin the research, and then he just sort of knew that the world would open up to him if he sold himself in a certain way, which was addressing a bunch of problems that were needed to be had. And then he had his result. He was world famous. He was trotted out on TV shows, flown around the world, sent to conventions. He wrote several books, right?
Right. Well, but I will have to say honestly, from my point of mind, that his true potential is in the future, and whether did he realize that? I mean, it's one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, to become world famous and to be invited places and to talk and to have people mention your name, that's a kind of success, but I don't think that was what he was really after.
No, you're right. The success he wanted was people to realize would be to dig deeper. The success would be right? His posterity is just a stake in the record of notoriety, right? A foot in the door towards the ideas of which he was spelling out and alluding to, often obliquely, because no one wants to,
No one wanted to hear the straight stuff.
yeah, well, yeah. Right, yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, there reminds me. There's a term which I don't like. Talking about books or certain topics are sexy, and certain others, like quantum physics is sexy, and classical physics not sexy, and I feel like there's something. McLuhan always did have that kind of sexy that he's kind of on the like a surfer on the current.
Yeah.
He's on the leading edge.
And on the leading, but actually, there's one thing that I thought was funny. He says, everyone wants to be hep. That was one of the things in his article, and it just reminded that there was a story of someone coming up to a Thelonious Monk and said, "Hey man, I'm really hep," and he said, "Yeah, that's right. I'm hip and you're hep."
Yeah.
But I was curious. I was curious. Does McLuhan write about Leopold Bloom as an advertiser?
Oh yeah, yeah. He saw that as Joyce directly recognizing the secession of artistic traditions into that specific role in society. Like the best artists are the people who work in advertising, because you can't find deeper, richer, ripe for analysis artwork anywhere except between the pages of a magazine.
But I think he's also criticizing it. I mean, there's the thing. He's kind of shameless. Like there's an ad he's going to he's selling where House of Keys. It's got Alexander Keys and House of Keys is the Manx Parliament with home. So he wants to get this kind of unconscious association with home rule, which is going to appeal to people who are going to go to the grocery store and buy baking soda or whatever. But that I guess that that's the idea that it's not just persuasion, but it's unconscious persuasion, and in a way, I think it adds to the general unconsciousness of the human race. Stimulus response without any conscious interlude, between them, and in the lobotomy kid in Naked Lunch, he says, humans can be reduced to an abbreviated spinal column. That's the idea.
They're working on it.
They're working on it.
Yeah, well, the relation between attention and consciousness, right? I think for McLuhan, what was unconscious was synonymous with what went unperceived. And so to be more conscious would be to actually have a conscious perception, to be noticing what's going on, to have perception and be like, oh, I see what that guy's doing. Oh, I see why they did that this way. Oh, I see where I am. Oh, I got a hunch about what's going to happen next, because you're watching all the pieces in the maelstrom and you're learning the pattern of how things work, and you're paying attention to things that no one else is noticing. This is why the sleuth, Sherlock Holmes, is a central character for as the legacy of Dupin and Poe, the sleuth, as we all must become hunters for information, like a tribal hunter who can follow the tracks in the woods and notices things in nature that other people can't, right? Just this
like Holmes. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, consciousness is perception of all the little details, or the big picture, or just having sensibility. And I don't want to say being able to see things, because that's a visually biased metaphor, right? Yeah. Being able to sense things, right?
Yeah, to perceive things.
But I think Bloom is aware. Actually, I wrote down this one. This is one of my favorite passages, where this is in Ithaca, where Bloom thinks he's thinking of some one sole advertisement to cause persons to stop and wonder, a poster novelty with all extraneous secretions excluded, reduced to its simplest and most efficient terms, not exceeding the span of casual vision, and congruous with the velocity of modern life. That's a
See, I
beautiful.
look at Bloom as an amiable, well-intentioned goofball.
Yeah, I think he's meant
Well,
to
he's an
be a good
aspirational artist.
Hmm?
He's aspiring to produce the finest art. He's aspiring to produce the
Well,
perfect
that's-
art.
Leopold Bloom is aspiring, well, and maybe
they
in
would
his
say
own
that
terms.
one of them is a touch of artist about the artist about old Bloom, and that's what a character says. There is.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. The material total world today is a piece of art.
Hmm.
And if you can look at it that way, then you won't be taken in by it as a religious phenomenon or as a mystical phenomenon, or the wizards who deliver the right, disenchanting the material world and its many illusions and making them the mere products of the human mind is another way to get at the central mission here, right? Because he's up against forces who are describing themselves as as
Masters of the universe.
terms. Yeah, magical. Yes, this
Masters of the universe.
this familiar
Yeah,
megalomania mysticism nonsense, right? Yeah.
right. I think there's an interesting parallelism between McLuhan and Joyce in the sense that both of them had their aspirations, which are still unfolding, and their real import, I don't think we're anywhere near their real import yet, but we're on the way. And I'm very, there's no way to answer this, but in McLuhan's case and in Joyce's case, how much confidence did they have as individuals that they would have greater and deeper influence long after they died?
You can only spend so much time studying the letters of some long deceased person in a published book, or going to museums to go see the relics of someone, to then suddenly be struck with the self-awareness of one's own image in posterity. And some people are totally obsessed with building their it's their immortality project to turn their posterity into some massive egomaniacal construction.
Right. The Ernest Becker project.
Yes, exactly. Yes, precisely. Right. So yeah, what will be my legacy, is one version of, what will I leave to my children is a different version of, beginning to think about one's, posterity, right? What the effect, the trace one will leave. And lots of people know that they don't have very much to leave.
Oh, it's like when Norman Mailer sold his archive for $1 million. I said, dang, my archive's at least worth $1,000. And now we're studying this whole philosophy of what you guys just talked about. Is Duncan's inquisitive, like how much were they living for, like the American Indians, indigenous, the 7 centuries after? Were Joyce and McLuhan living for the moment and just happened to be creating this archive that was important? Because studying McLuhan, one of his best books is The Letters of Marshall McLuhan, and it's not his book really, but it is.
So maybe we could say that a good ideal for who to become is someone disciplined, of a certain taste and a certain level of restraint, and also a certain level of spontaneity, such that one can live for the moment and fuck around and have fun securely, knowing that you're probably not going to do something so dumb as to fuck up your legacy.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Joyce lived for the moment, and he knew how to enjoy. He said, "I think the stage should support me because I know how to enjoy myself." He did know how.
Did he say that? That's brilliant.
He didn't, but he certainly had his immortality project. This is in the wake. He was
Right.
he built that brick by brick, and he even said, I'm kind of a pauper I really don't have any way of really entering into society, but I'm going to come into my kingdom. I am.
I think that Joyce deliberately made him he went through a lot of money. Joyce went through an incredible amount of money. And he would always, when he got a lot of money, he would just spend it until he was a pauper again.
Yeah.
And I've thought about that a lot. And I think that was I don't know if it was a conscious strategy, but I do believe it was a deliberate strategy.
Yeah.
That he always had to tear all of his finances down to a level that he could remind himself again that if push came to shove, he could survive on almost nothing. And that was how he managed to keep integrity in his work. As opposed to someone getting a bunch of money and then, putting in the bank and investing it. So, and then living off the interest, but then being dependent upon, getting more money from people. I think Joyce wanted.
But also, he didn't let it influence him. There was, I forget the woman, she was his patron, and she was a patient of Jung. No, this is a different woman. She was a patient of Jung, and Jung was worried about Joyce's drinking, so he convinced her to tell Joyce, unless you agree to see Jung as a patient, I'm going to cut off your funds.
Right.
And he said, "Go ahead, cut him off. I'm not going to do it. You're not going to get me to do that."
It's like when I asked Eric, if you follow the word "the" with the philosophy of your life, just one word, let's say Joyce's "the wake," what would Marshall's be? And Eric said, "the playground." And I says, what would your dad's be? The playground. And I think the word play is important, that they both were playing and they were manipulating satirists. And this thing about your archive or your wealth after you die, Louis Buñuel nailed it. He's also a major manipulating satirist. They said, who are you going to leave your estate to? He goes, Rockefeller.
More than anybody else.
These guys were definitely playful. But I wanted to go back. Roy, you saying the word surfing is so important. Marshall said surfing, and then surfing Heidegger or whatever. This is like surfing the net. So they're like Martha Graham, great artists are ahead of their times. They are their times. And the times might resonate. All times are happening now. But, this story, I'm about to talk with this guy who's been working on a documentary on Howard Gossage for years. You have to talk to him, Clinton. And he's doing a BBC thing now. He started it as a film documentary, Ashley, and I'm going to hook you up with them. But, basically Howard Gossage is a major ad guy in America. He invented the T-shirt with the face on it. He invented like greenness. He said, let's save the this nature. He's an amazing ad guy in San Francisco. And he reads The Medium as a Message or The Medium as a Massage. And he calls up McLuhan. He says, dude, this book's amazing. I want to make you famous. I'll give you $5,000. And Marshall went, sure, go ahead. So he ended up on the cover of Newsweek. So Duncan, I really seek out, if you read the article on McLuhan in Newsweek with McLuhan on the cover, it's an amazing article. It really reveals a lot, like how he got over on people. Then you see somebody like as iconic as Peter Fonda, the star of Easy Rider. He's on the David Frost show, and they bring out McLuhan, and Peter Fonda's there holding up Today, Take Today, and he's going, read this. He's telling America, and Marshall's just this academic who's like playing along. You know, then he's in the Woody Allen film, but he plays along and he's having fun. But it was like Zappa said, I don't care what they pay attention to me after I die. That's what politicians do. But again, that's him over romanticizing it. I think Joyce, McLuhan, Zappa, Duchamp, all are worried in some sense about how people are going to remember them or how their legacy is going to live on, because you can't escape it. It's so prominent that you can't go, oh, I'm not that. I'm just going to create my art and whatever happens. It's so much part of you in your society and the norms that you can't just deny it. By denying it, you're maybe even empowering it. And sorry for going on and on, but the last one is Marshall said ads are the cave art of our time. Mm-hmm. So, what is cave art? Everybody's like, well, it's ritual or it's magic. Or my favorite answer ever was, what was the motive of the cave artist? And the guy goes, to keep people in the cave.
Well, or give them something to do on a rainy day.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Just to nitpick, if we're making a Plato's cave joke, you didn't have to try very hard to keep people in the cave. In fact, you had to drag them out kicking and screaming. They didn't want to leave the cave.
That's it.
So it's not very hard to keep people in.
But do you know that here's a freaky history about films? We got people addicted to vaudeville, which is live performance in a theater. Then they invent movies and they're going to put them in the same theaters. So then they start trying to convince these people to clear out of the theater because there's a new live act coming in, vaudeville. Okay, the new act's coming in, or the act's coming in, we got to clear the house and get a new full house. So they would use movies, the new invention, as chasers. So they would show films to chase the audience out of the theater to bring the new audience in to see the live act. So movie, and then a couple of years ago, they started saying, oh, we're going to have comedians open before the movies, a live act. It's like, that's just the flip of how movies came in. So this is constant.
Well, it's the difference of what taking something new that people are not used to, which it can be either one.
Yeah.
People can be used to live, but not used to film, or they can be used to film and not used to live. And whichever one, comes into contrast with what's before is going to have a more dramatic effect.
Yeah. And sorry to go off because you guys really got into the meat of interviewing Clinton about his articles and getting deeper. I appreciated that talk about Bloom and all the questions, and I welcome more. But there's one question I'm curious about. Whoever said this, advertising is communication between machines. Does anyone, the phenomenon of advertising is people go, well, I don't pay attention to advertising. But if you ask, does advertising work? Usually people don't say no. They go, yes, it works, but I don't pay attention. So there's that weird sort of gap there. Oh, it's everywhere. I sit at half my life at the corner of Lincoln and Venice on my bike. And where does my eyes go but to the billboards? Where else? I'm going to look at people in their cars being sad, And so how people can't avoid advertising. They claim they do, but they can't avoid it. And they say,
yeah.
Especially when it's
They're
unconscious.
tracking us down and sticking
They're tracking us down.
advertising billboards in our backs. Of course, we can't avoid it.
And then everybody has a fucking logo on their t-shirts. I hate logo t-shirts, and I've worn Converse tennis shoes for 50 years. And I'm a walking advertisement for them. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, actually, I remember my first encounter with the idea of the hidden persuaders.
Yes.
Was in one of our great sources, Mad Magazine. Where
Yes.
I remember they're watching a movie, and then suddenly, for a split second, it says, drink Coke, and then everybody, after the movie ends, everybody, it goes, why are we all drinking Coke? I don't know.
Well, that's even Mark Mothersbaum of Devo. He's an art kid trying to pull the curtain back and reveal the Wizard of Us with Devo. And now he plants Buy Devo records in the middle of his Wes Anderson movies or Disney cartoons, So, I mean, that, by the way,
started.
Yeah. By the way, well, Duncan, you're a good example. You didn't grow up with TV. That's an unusual, that's a good thing. Like, how do we? But this Hidden Persuaders, you got to realize. I was going to put it. The intro to like the second edition of Hidden Persuaders, written by McLuhan, is an amazing article. One other article to resource is Marshall's 2 or 3 page review of Burroughs' Naked Lunch in The Nation magazine. That is such a great testimony to what you're talking about, Clinton, is actually read McLuhan. Those 2 things alone are worth reading, and I give them out often.
Right. But could you send that?
Yes. Yeah, I'll send you both. Clinton, can you talk about that? Advertising is communication between machines.
Yeah. First, I'd like to point out that the McLuhan piece, The Age of Advertising, he literally says in it, I just pulled it up here. Ads are written to have their effect on those whose attention is distracted by the other items around them. Nothing kills the power of an ad like paying conscious attention to it.
Yeah.
So, anyone who says that they just ignore ads are exactly the ones most influenced by them would be the quality there, right?
But how can you? That's like, how can you really ignore ads?
You can try. And I mean, this is what the blogger, the psychiatrist, would always say. It's like, even if you successfully don't, like, if you escape exposure to advertisements in your day-to-day life, you're still stuck living in society, in a world surrounded by people who aren't and don't, and so ads are still controlling your life anyway.
Anyways, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but Duncan's a good example. Go ahead, Doug.
No, am I a good example? I don't know, but I will say that actually, I think that the fruitful thing is another parallel between McLuhan and Joyce, which is in both cases in their literatures, they're pointing us to aspects of reality which we're not usually aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the deeper and deeper I get into Joyce, the more I realize what a trickster he is, that he's really training us to perceive.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And he's really, this is going to sound a little contradictory, but like in Ulysses, he's literally building us a cave, a completely spherical cave with all things connected to all things, and teaching us to look for those connections, which of course is going to transfer into one's waking life over time, where we begin to look for connections between things and begin to become aware. And of course, McLuhan is doing the same thing, which is, when he gives his talks and when he writes his books, he's pointing out things which are not normally pointed out.
And so how is this style of language usage treated by semioticians and people who study Chomsky's generative grammar and linguists? How do they treat these usages of language as employed by Joyce?
I can't answer that question.
You're asking us a question, Clinton?
Yeah. How do linguists talk about these styles of language usage, I guess is my question. Contemporary linguists, the field as a field.
Well, I would take Lakoff and Mark Johnson as examples. And,
Yeah.
Lakoff and Mark Johnson are doing the same thing where they're trying to wake us up to these hidden aspects of language and what parts of language actually are predominant in our head. So, for example, in the category of furniture is very abstract. It is not a fundamental concept, but a chair is. And so metaphors made with chairs are actually stronger and have greater impact than an abstract, multisyllabic word like furniture.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
So
to point to general concepts is always a weaker rhetorical strategy, right?
Yeah. And so, I think once again, if I may be wrong, I know Joyce better than I know McLuhan, but in Joyce is very, very specific about things. And will, to make you aware of something, he will use an unusual word for it. Where you go, what the hell does he mean by that? And then by the time you've looked it up and you come back to the thing, and then you've read gone through the whole book 3 or 4 times, then it begins to attract your attention.
Yeah.
So, and I think McLuhan does a lot of the same sort of thing. His for the average person, his vocabulary can get a little abstract, but he's enough of a, use Jerry's word, enough of a playful character that you kind of want to understand what he's saying. So I don't know. I'll stop.
Yeah. So poetry needs to be read again and again and again, and you're alluding to how the fact you have to read Joyce again and again and again, and McLuhan's writing things like there's a misapprehension out there that the literary person is a fast reader, but wine connoisseurs aren't fast drinkers. They take time to savor the body and whatnot, right? So yeah, the idea that books are for information transfer, and that I read 6 books that this week, and they're all on the top 10 list, and they're all written for a grade 12 reading level, and after you've read them once, you're never gonna ever open that book again, right? It's like how to be a effective middle manager, using this, like that's what passes for communication in most of the textual things that we encounter day to day.
It's like slow food and slow cinema is a big trend now. And talk about slow reading groups. My Finnegan's Wake reading group in Venice is it's celebrating its 28th year in October, and we still haven't gotten through the wake once.
We're close. We're close.
We're close, and it's going to kick over, and we'll just keep
like going. 8 more months. 8 more months. If we
Are you doing the first Tuesday or the second Tuesday of the month now?
We do first Tuesdays, but there are exceptions.
Okay.
Sorry.
There are a lot of exceptions.
But that's a great question, Clinton, and we should do another whole Zoom on that. We could close out here, guys. If anybody who has closing comments, I welcome. But how do the linguists like Chomsky deal with McLuhan? I'll give you a good, funny example. I was trying to peddle Bob's McLuhan DVD, whatever it was. It was McLuhan, Dave Neufeld's McLuhan DVD. What's it called? It's pretty good. It's not Bob's album. It's McLuhan. It's editing McLuhan down to like 60 minutes as like a pop album. And we peddled it to Rhino Records, and they called him a linguist. I goes, dude, you can call them whatever you want. It's hard to figure out what section of the book genre in the bookstore to put them in. Sociology, media studies, psychology. You know, I've been through it for years. Where do you stick McLuhan in which part? Philosophy. You know,
Greek
it goes.
tragedy,
Yeah, everything. But here's
understanding Medea.
yeah, here's the best. I went into Dutton's once in the Valley, one of the best bookstores in LA, and I found Mechanical Bride in the fashion book section. That was like a gem. It sold for $50, and then it was like $8, a hardcover. So it goes full circle. But yeah, really good. Leaving us with a question. Clinton is smart. How do linguists like Chomsky deal with McLuhan? And anybody else have any like closing?
Actually, I have one question. We didn't get too much into magic, which interests me. I didn't know if does McLuhan talk about, or are you familiar with the essay Magic by Yeats? Where it's a great essay about how the borders of our minds are shifting, and everybody share, and our memories, and it goes back to group memory, kind of like the collective unconscious, but they can be evoked through symbols, and Joyce was aware of that passage and that essay, and he said he evoked that mind through trivial and the quadrivium and the trivium, but that has a different, it seems to me that advertising is kind of the opposite, where it doesn't seem like it connects people to any kind of primordial consciousness of the human race. It seems like the opposite.
Different type of magic, though.
Yeah, but Joyce did. He talked about Catholicism in Ireland as black magic, and in Ulysses, Bloom he talks about repetition in the church, pray for us and pray for us and pray for us, and repetition in advertising, buy from us and buy from us, and he connects those two things, and Bloom even says, repetition. That's the whole idea of advertising, is having repetition.
Well, Yeats often comes up with McLuhan grouped together with Joyce and Eliot, but there's a distinction that he makes about he sticks Yeats more in the camp of the pre-Raphaelites, for whom the technique is to isolate like a single scene or feeling or sensation and then prolong that sensation as long as possible. So the poem is like one long drawn out experience of this one feeling said, drawn out. And the later modernists were more, the other modernists drew on more of this dynamic approach of instantiating a feeling and then rolling with it, and as the poem goes on or as the art piece continues, they're playing around inside the wedge of sensation they created in you, and they begin orchestrating a whole bunch of stuff. It's a very subtle point that's very I'm not as good of a literary mind to actually recognize what he's saying within the poems, respectively.
Well, I know he does have that, a memory isolated by a deed to engross the present and dominate memory, and image. That's a great line. I think it's among school children. But the idea that the image, the present image, became the thing he fell in love with, rather than what the image was originally represented.
So next time we get together, if we do something like this, remind me to tell you the story of when William Butler Yeats kicked Aleister Crowley down the stairs.
Oh, really?
Of their magic meeting place.
Okay.
Of them, yeah. Crowley was coming to wreak vengeance on them for Yeats saying bad things about them in Paris. So that's one thing. But on the magic thing, I just want to say one more thing, because I think that advertising is magic only in the sense of promising to be magic.
Oh,
Yeah.
So this is what, you're going to go on the vacation to the Tahitis and you're going to experience paradise. And by the way, you'll want to buy, you'll definitely want to buy this particular dress for travel because it's easy to wash and it'll make your life so much more convenient and blah, blah, blah. Those kinds of seductive, promising magics. And I use, I've always been relatively non-materialistic for whatever reasons. But I began to wonder why are people get so materialistic, and at one point when I was really into mysticism and that kind of stuff, I thought, geez, in a past lifetime, matter of fact, I was named after my yoga teacher gave me the name of a fabulously wealthy king in India. And that this king was so wealthy that he had no feelings for material stuff at all. He was so used to them. And that I when I got to university and met, poor kids who were struggling to become things like pharmacists and business majors and all that, and all they could talk about was making money, and they were going to get a Corvette, and they were going to drive around, and the girls were just going to love them because they had all this stuff. And I began to realize that this was a kind of poverty that that would make all this advertising promises seem so magical. It was like I had become blasé. I was like the jaded person who, for some, had already had all that stuff and was not really interested in that much.
Probably easy to be non-materialistic if you're really wealthy.
These words don't really work for me anymore because very little is material anymore. I mean, I'd love to be a materialist, meaning like owning physical objects that subsist over time and can be treated, handled, and repaired as physical objects. But most of the so-called commodities aren't even tangible. They're literally made. They're on the other side of a computer screen, or they're produced with an expiry date. They're engineered out of a computer precisely to lose their object permanence by breaking at a presupposed time for you to then need to buy another one. Not only is the stuff on your iPhone not tangible, all the websites and whatever, but the phone itself
will be obsolete
after lacks object permanence. It itself is not a true material object in the sense that usually if something's there and you don't break it, it's gonna last forever, right? We've literally engineered objects that should last forever into an ephemeral impermanence. So I mean, it's not even materialism anymore. That's like that word doesn't describe the world I grew up in and live in at a regular level, right?
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to point out that there's the word magic in itself has multiple meanings, and
certainly
there is,
because I loved Duncan. I think the main magic that all four of us really value is the magic of the book. I mean, look at that book, McLuhan. This is a book. And this is like, what a funny title, From Cliche to Archetype. And, that's one thing that we are materialistic about. I think all four of us, literally the book.
Yeah.
It isn't a magical thing. Yeah. And Duncan, I want to especially thank you for doing an advertisement.
My book's bigger than your book.
Yeah, you did it Duncan did an advertisement. He really lured the listener by saying, I'm not going to tell you right now the story of Crowley and Yates, but I will in our next session. So that was good advertising.
Got the rhetorical technique, and I would have gone into what I think I'm doing sometimes on Zooms.
No, I loved it, but it is a great question that Roy brought up, Clinton, is that, when you think of occult and magic, you don't think of McLuhan. You don't go, well, he didn't go into that kooky kind of, Crowley-esque or Blavatsky world. But
he did. He kept it to himself, and he didn't. And he didn't talk about it. Well, for the same reason, he'd say, "You don't need to tell anyone that I'm Catholic. It's just enough that people perhaps might know that or not." Right? Like his idea.
Oh, did he say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was never introduced to an audience anywhere at any lecture as a Catholic, unless it was like at some Catholic university and friggin',
I think I'm gonna have to take off.
All right.
Yeah.
Nice
Thanks,
seeing
Roy.
everybody.
Thank you so much, Roy.
Thanks, Roy.
Yeah.
Good seeing you.
And a good article, Clinton. Good way to go.
Thank you so much. But I just had, if Duncan and Clinton can stick for a second, I had one little concluding thing I thought would be how to resolve this is
resolve this. We're going to resolve something?
Yeah, this is Wu-Tang Clan. This very popular rap group with one of our major Joyceans, Peter Quadrino. And this is someone who deals with rap music, conspiracy theories, and got really big.
And baseball.
Yeah, and Peter loves baseball, rap, and Finnegan's Wake. But the main rap guy is rap group is Wu-Tang Clan. And they, in this whole thing of us learning from Joyce and McLuhan how to perceive. That was so well put, Duncan. And what are the hidden psychic effects? What's a little deeper, like deep sea diving, like a little deeper than just reading McLuhan or reading Joyce? There's something maybe deeper. And Wu-Tang Clan says, cachet rules everything around us. Now, cachet is spelled C-A-C-H-E. Yeah. Now, it can be pronounced almost like cash rules everything around us. That's cachet is etymologically rooted in hidden items. The hidden. And so if you pronounce it cachet, C-A-S-H-Y, the word cachet has come to mean influence or clout.
Yes, cachet.
Cachet rules everything around us. So, Wu-Tang Clan could be using this, double meaning, this hidden psychic effect. Is it hidden, concealed, or is it influence and clout? So I like to play the game. Drop the word cachet and substitute it for your own new word. Blank rules everything around us. In light of what we've talked about for 2 hours, what would you say now, Clinton? What would you substitute for cachet? Blank rules everything around us.
Rules. Okay, I'll just be tautological. Rules rule everything around us.
Good. Rules rule everything around us. Okay, Duncan.
What rules everything around us?
He turned it into a question. Boy, you guys are on the same wavelength. What rules rule everything around us? And notice you guys dropped the S on the verb, so that was good. There's no stinking rules to my game.
Rules rule, man.
Rules rule, dude. And you know, the other thing, when Roy left, I forgot to tell him, McLuhan also, he said Catholics are black, Catholicism is black magic.
That's
That's what
Joyce was saying.
Joyce said that. Yeah, Roy said that. Joyce said that Catholicism was black magic. Do you know what McLuhan called the wake?
Okay,
The black,
yes, I thought you're getting at. He said that
the black mass.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you study, I studied the black mass after Andrew Crystal asked Eric this at a conference, and Eric said, yes, my dad said that, just to confirm it. And it's somewhere in print.
Go to a Black Sabbath concert? What do you Black Mass?
No, Andrew was punk, not metal. But here's the thing: Black Mass is
what I'm saying. It's like
look up Black Mass.
Well,
Black Mass is a satirical thing.
Well, yes, it would be anything which was a satire of a mass would necessarily,
yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Okay. So, anyways, onward to finding out more primary sources, secondary sources, and the ruling sources. Thank you so much, Clinton and Duncan. This has really been fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Putting it together.
Look forward to next time, whenever that might be. Okay.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
indeed.